Sometimes the ability to read body language and, well, analyze a statement or an answer to a present question can be critical when the person in question is the CEO of one of the most, if not the biggest company in the world. In this case, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, who is basically at the heart of all that is the AI race right now. So he was asked the question, is AI a bubble? Is this about to burst? Is this safe to, try to maintain the pace that is pushing to be able to achieve all those goals that they have set? Well, just in case you are not aware of what we're talking about in terms of a bubble, maybe you have seen this graphic. I'm going to do a very brief introduction to this, like in 30 seconds. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang was asked if we're in an AI bubble. This was his full 3 minutes response. Chubby says that it was a perfect dodging of the question, but I want to really see if the question was dodged. You know that this is basically what is happening right now. A very simplified explanation of what is going on. The entire U.S. economy right now is 7 companies sending trillions back and forth to each other. That is like an oversimplification, but Bloomberg made this graphic in which you can see that NVIDIA is at the heart of it all, in between OpenAI, Intel, Oracle, and xAI, and Microsoft, of course. This is maybe a bit technical to explain, but the people at Morning Brew on YouTube made a very funny video to explain how this works. NVIDIA to invest up to $100 billion in OpenAI. NVIDIA, the chip maker, the one who makes the hardware, to invest $100 billion on OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, or the main AI software that people are using right now, linking to artificial intelligence titans. Then Oracle and OpenAI sign a $300 billion cloud deal. I'm going to play this clip shortly, but I'm going to just describe it first. And Oracle is going to buy 40 billion of NVIDIA chips for OpenAI's US data center. So you see how this basic circle that they did this.
Here you go.
Thank you so much. Here you go.
Thanks. Thanks so much. Here you go.
Thank you so much. Here you go.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, but this is basically it. Of course, again, this is an oversimplification, but there's the reality that if one of these companies fails, and yeah, we're looking at OpenAI and ChatGPT, and the fact that it has just been revealed that OpenAI has to rise around $200 billion by 2030. And I don't know how are they going to do that. But well, Jensen Huang, in this case, he was asked the question. I'm going to pose the question and we're going to analyze how he did. And maybe you are interested to know how can you deal with a question like this when you have to answer but not answer the question at the same time. Let's see what we can learn from Huang.
Are we going to have an AI bubble? That's the last question. All right, all right, let me just tell you what we see. Okay, so
the question is, are there going to be an AI bubble, as in if one of these companies fails, then everything comes crashing down as a house of cards? And we see the first reaction is try to joke it. He fixes himself in the chair. He fixes his jacket. He's preparing to answer this question, although I'm sure that he has answered these questions many times, so he is ready for that. But notice, this is very important, that the question is there going to be an AI bubble? The question is rather vague, but at the same time, we are seeing the words AI bubble. But what does Huang say?
So I think it's really important when you look at what's happening around the world and go back to first principles of what's happening in computer science and computing. There are 3 things that's happening. The first thing is that we all know that Moore's law has run its course, and the amount of demand for computing versus the amount of computation we can get out of general purpose computing is really challenging.
Okay, just a brief explanation here for if you're not aware. Moore's law was the law that said that every 2 years, the chips that our computers use were going to double in power and halve in price. So it was Moore's law does not apply anymore for what is called CPUs, which is the general purpose chips that we use in our computers. So it's like we hit kind of a wall. We cannot be doubling that power every 2 years and slashing the price in half every 2 years. It's simply not possible. What is needed right now is a change of the architecture of these chips from general purpose to accelerated computing, which are the chips that NVIDIA make. Of course, he is talking about something that he is personally invested in, because his value right now is like $160 billion. That is his value just by being the CEO of NVIDIA. So he has to talk about the switch to accelerated computing, and well, he has not addressed anything about the AI bubble yet, but let's see down the line what he says.
And so the world's been moving to accelerated computing for some time. We've been pushing this now for over 20 years. Let me give you one statistic. I was just at supercomputing. 6 years ago, CPUs were 90% of the world's supercomputers, top 500 supercomputers. 6 years ago. This year, less than 15%.
Okay, right now, again, CPUs are the general ones, the ones that are like multitaskers, but the accelerated ones, the GPUs, are the main protagonists right now. The world is changing towards what NVIDIA makes.
Went from 90% to 10%, and meanwhile, accelerated computing went from the other way, 10% to now 90%. Okay, so you're seeing that inflection point, the transition in high-performance computing from general-purpose computing to accelerated computing. Well, one of the most
so far, he has been really eloquent, a very fluid way of answering the question. He uses his hands and illustrator gestures, reaffirming his words. He says he seems very confident of what he's saying, but he has not really addressed the question yet. He's talking about the change of paradigm between general purpose CPUs and accelerated computing GPUs.
Data intensive, one of the most intensive computation things that the world does in cloud is data processing. Several $100 billion of computation is done on just raw data processing. It has nothing to do with AI.
That is interesting. The question has all to do with AI, and the first part of his three-part question, he just said that himself, has nothing to do with AI. How does that work exactly? But okay.
Just SQL processing, data frames, everybody's names, address, their sex, their age, where they live, how much money they make. All of that sits into a data frame, and that data frame drives the world today, whether it's in banking or whether it's in credit cards or, of course, e-commerce and everything from ad recommendation. Everything is driven off of that data frame. That data frame costs hundreds of dollars to go compute.
Okay, that we agree on that. There's this humongous amount of data right now that has to be sorted, classified, used, transferred, analyzed, everything right now, and we simply cannot keep up using CPUs. We need GPUs for that. But again, we just reached the first part of his answer, and he has not talked about AI. In fact, he purposefully said that this has nothing to do with AI so far. So that is a bit concerning. Let's see the second part. This is the second part. There's going to be a bit of a problem with the recording with in this 5 seconds, but I can explain.
And so that's the number one thing, end of Moore's law. The second thing is generative.
Okay, this is the issue that the
last
had.
15 years is called REXs, recommender systems. How do we know what information to recommend to us in a social feed? How do you know what ad to recommend to somebody, what book to recommend, what movie to recommend? The internet is so gigantic without a recommender system that a little tiny phone of us will have no chance of ever seeing the right information. That Rexis is the engine of the internet today. That's going generative AI. It used to be running on CPUs, now it runs on GPUs, which then says the third thing.
Okay, this has there's a error in the captions. Not GPS, it's GPUs. This has a lot to do with how we use the internet nowadays. You know that we used to have this recommendation only based on text, like on Google when we had a search, or on Twitter, on the Twitter days, or on Facebook. Basically, the recommendations were based on text, but the recommendations nowadays are pretty much multimodal, like actually multimedia, with a sound, video, everything. We consume a lot of content. In fact, you're consuming my content in the form of a video, so you need actually, artificial intelligence to, like in this case, watch my video, and maybe you are watching my video because YouTube's AI watch it and say, oh, maybe this video is going to be interesting for you, and recommended this video to you in your homepage. Maybe that's a good example, but imagine the amount of computational power that you need to have all the posts and nowadays, all the videos nowadays, everything to, being able to serve something relevant for you. That is a bit of AI, but it's more like an industrial use, not an LLM, which is most likely what the journalist was asking, because that's another part of the question. The question was a bit vague. AI is a vast array of services. ChatGPT, OpenAI, is just an LLM, a large language model, which is just a slice of the pie. But that's a very important slice of the pie. So I think that the question should have been more specific. But again, in the second part of his answer, he has kind of dodged the question about, are these companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, xAI actually profitable? Are they going to be profitable? If not, is there going to be a bubble? If the bubble bursts, is the United States government going to save these companies that are too big to fail? What is going to happen with that? That is the concern of people about the economy. And the third part of this has to do with...
If you just look at those two applications, many of the internet companies can build an enormous number of GPU supercomputers just doing that. Of course, then it creates the third opportunity on top of it, which is agentic AI. This is Grok, and this is OpenAI, this is Anthropic, this is Gemini. Agentic AI sits on top of that. But don't forget to think about what is happening underneath what everybody sees as AI today. There's a whole movement of computing, from general purpose computing to accelerated computing.
Notice that he mentions agentic AIs, which includes, of course, ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, Gemini. This LLMs like running on autopilot to serve you as digital servants or digital slaves or digital researchers, as you want to call them. But it's just at the end. As in this huge infrastructure that, of course, NVIDIA is at the core of that infrastructure, supports these people, but it's like I can't possibly know if these companies can just make this work. So he's not really answering the question. He is answering in a brilliant way, like saying, like making sure that NVIDIA will prevail. NVIDIA will have a lot of business with all the world. We're going to thrive. We're going to be... That's his job as CEO. He's basically pitching NVIDIA right now and all the opportunities worldwide that the company is going to have to make money. But he's not answering is there an AI bubble question. That is the issue. And at the same time, the question was a bit vague. Let's watch the very last part of this.
And that, if you take that into consideration, you'll come to the conclusion that in fact, what is left over to fuel that revolutionary agentic AI is not only substantially less than you thought, and all of it justified.
Yeah, it was a bit of a word salad at the end, but yeah, at the same time, he's not wrong. All this AI in which basically the economy of the United States is hoping that it wins the AI race against China, and it doesn't just collapse as a house of cards. They know that Nvidia is going to do well, but we are hoping that these people, the other guys, especially Sam Altman, know what they're doing. I have a Sam Altman analysis, by the way. But let me know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Bad Language Guy. Much love and bliss.